farm group. And so, but I was happy, right? Even the mosquitoes were eating me alive. I was happy to be there. I was happy to contribute. I felt so ready. You know, I was in a PhD program. I knew it all. I had experience in Palermo, right? And so I go to see this professor who actually was from Austria, right? A nice round guy. And we sat down, and I came with all my stacks of notes, and I wanted to show him, you know, what I was going to do and how we were going to resolve the conflict in this place and how I was going to help and all of that. And then this professor looks at me and says, well, but you cannot talk about conflict resolution in this place. You cannot say you're going to do a workshop in conflict resolution. Because he said, this is a very sensitive language, and if you talk about peace, if you talk about conflict resolution, you really don't know who is going to be in this group, and it can be interpreted in different ways. So you have to avoid that kind of language. You cannot talk about peace and peace building. This can be misinterpreted completely, right? So I say, well, what about, you know, how do we talk about this massacre we just had? Oh, no, you cannot even mention that, right? That's very sensitive, right? So, okay, so here I was, right, thinking of leading this fantastic workshop in conflict resolution to help people to overcome a massacre, but I couldn't mention any of that. Well, first of all, it was very interesting because I asked myself, okay, if you cannot even mention the word peace and what is happening, right, how bad is the situation and how do we actually turn these things around, right? So I got in a little bit of a panic, right, because everything I had prepared, all my stacks of notes, I could just throw it away, right? And the next morning, I had these 40 leaders who were coming to my workshop, and at that point, I didn't have anything ready. So I took a stroll on the beach, right, because it's a very beautiful Caribbean beach. And I was looking at the horizon, hoping that from the horizon some ideas and some intuition would come. And at one point, as I was walking on the beach, you know, I was really anxious. I would constantly say, I don't know what to do, right? So almost in panic, right? And as I was sowing this, you know, idea of not knowing what to do, I saw two kids wrestling on the beach and in the water. And they were throwing each other in the water and keeping each other down, right? And I started thinking, well, maybe I have to intervene and do something because they might harm themselves. And as I was thinking that, I see these two kids get up, they shake their hands, they have a great laugh, they embrace themselves. They were probably just playing, right? But for me, it was an interesting experience because I said, well, maybe Aldo, you just don't have to do anything. Maybe you don't have to intervene, right? Maybe this I don't know, instead of leaving it as something that is full of anxiety, you have to leave it as a good thing, as a positive thing. You have to work on this thing that I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to facilitate the workshop tomorrow. I don't know what the result of the workshop will do. I don't know if it's going to be useful, right? I don't know what to do. And it's actually very good because it's a very different I don't know than the I don't know previous I don't know, no? It's not the I don't know, the stressed one, the anxious one. I don't know, which closes me up. It's the I don't know that opens me up to curiosity, that lets me be open to things happening, that let solutions, intuition, ideas to emerge. And so that was then my new mindset. I said, I don't know what to do. And the only idea that I brought back from that walk at the beach with me was, well, I know that storytelling can be very cathartic. And that if people tell their stories, something might happen positive in them. That was somehow the only idea that came up in that moment. And I think you spoke about listening. I think this is really the most important quality, also in negotiation and in creating connection. It can turn things around, just the fact that you're just listening without saying anything. And for me, that turned around a very difficult situation because I was in Colombia dealing with a very difficult ceasefire negotiation. And I had the sympathy, if you want, of the bad guys, of the guerrilla, but I had absolutely against me and trying to boycott my work the government negotiator, to the point where he was accusing me of being a member of the international front of this guerrilla group, which has consequences like ending up in jail, right? Especially if it's the country negotiator, the government negotiator who does it. So, and I was trying to meet him, and every time he would set up a meeting with me, he would cancel at the last minute. But he would continue to lie about who I am and who I was. So at one point, I had an appointment at the U.S. Embassy to do some briefing about the conflict, and I said, well, I want to take the opportunity. I want to talk to the ambassador and tell him I have this problem of and that it can be dangerous, not only jail, but I was also getting death threats at the time, so it was not really easy. And so when I was about to tell that to the ambassador said, well, I spoke to the negotiator. I told him we are going to meet, and he said, oh, I would like to finally meet Mr. Aldo Civico. Also, great, I take the opportunity. And so he set up a meeting, right? I was pretty nervous because I resented him. I probably also hated him for the things that he was telling me, but I tried to remain focused on why we were meeting, and I said, I need to find a connection I need to be able to work with this guy, because otherwise I'm not gonna be efficient facilitating this ceasefire negotiation. And so I remember we got in this room, he had a PowerPoint presentation, I sat down, I did the screen thing that I just told you, trying to imagine him in a more funny and pleasant way. And I listened to him for 3 hours. The guy didn't stop talking for 3 hours, and once in a while he was going under my skin and trying to have a powerful reaction, but I had my secret screen, and so I was able to listen.
3 hours.
3 hours, yeah. and I walked out that office with a hemicrane so strong that I had to cancel my flight and stay one night more there. But we changed the quality of our relationship. From that moment on, every time I went to Bogota, he wanted to see me, and he opened up more and more. And we created a trust, not as buddies and friends, but that working trust that allowed us, in very critical moment then during the peace process, to bring things forward. It didn't end with the agreement of the ceasefire as we would have loved to, but the good news is that yesterday this group announced that we are picking up against the talks, so you can see that the work done is not lost, right? But for me, that was a important experience, because I had all, if I would have just followed my emotions, I would have screamed at the guy, right? Or strangled him, or not have meet him, right? But remaining focused on why I was there, what my role was, and just hearing him out until the last word for 3 hours, getting my hemicrane, that was what turned things around in terms of the quality.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to you, especially Senator George Mitchell, for your generosity and for welcoming my invitation to this conversation. The idea came while I was reading your memoir, because it would be fantastic to have a chance to dig in some aspect of a very rich life, because from a humble background you had really the opportunity to serve a lot of people, a lot of communities and good causes here in the United States and around the world. Some of the highlights and titles of your career Josh already mentioned, but I would like just to add also that you were a federal judge, you were a Democratic majority leader, you made history in Northern Ireland, as we heard. You were recently appointed by President Obama as a special envoy to the Middle East. You called to advise, that's something that I discovered by reading your memoir, but you were called to advise the Red Cross on how to devise the most effective way to distribute $1 billion to those affected by the 9/11 attacks. You took over as a chairman of Disney's at a difficult time for that company, and you were also chosen to investigate steroid use in major baseball leagues. So last night, out of curiosity, I went to see what readers are saying about your book in an app that is called Goodreads. And a lot of people were saying, I would like to meet George Mitchell. And I said, how lucky we are tonight, actually, to have this opportunity to meet you. And as I was reading the memoir, some of the keywords or tags, like the millennials would say today, that, in my opinion, describe your character as it emerges from your narrative, are words like integrity, public service, respect, courage, commitment. A lot of those characteristics that I feel a lot of people today are looking in terms of authenticity of leadership and in politics and elsewhere. And from reading your memoir, I got a sense that those characteristics, that authenticity, that integrity, has really roots in your own family, in the example of your parents, especially in the example of your mother. And I was wondering, as a start out, you could tell us about the example and the beginnings of your family in Maine.
Well, thank you, Aldo. Thank you first for the very generous introduction. Thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I'll begin with the more recent event and lead me back to respond to your question.